Hello and welcome to this week's tutorial. This week we're going to take a look at Ivy, which is an add-on that was recently added to Blender 2.59. Currently the only available version is the release candidate 1, um, so it's not the super official version yet, but hopefully within the next week or two, which may be when you're watching this, the final version of 2.59 will be out. And possibly, if you're watching this months down the line, 2.6 will probably be along by then. But less worrying about version numbers and more worrying about what we're doing. So, creating Ivy, I am going to get rid of my default cube and add in a cylinder so that I've got a nice sort of cylindrical pillar type thing that the ivy can grow up along. It's fairly good for showing what's going on. And with ivy, as with anything, when you generate it, it is generated at the cursor. So at the moment the cursor's underneath and it's not a very good position for the ivy to grow from. So what we can do is go to edit mode, select a vertice, go Shift S, cursor deselected, and the cursor will now be in the exact place that that vertice is. So when we generate the ivy, it can grow up and along everything nice and happily. So back into object mode, and then I'll go Control U to bring up my user preferences, go to add-ons, and under the add curve set, you'll find IvyGen. Just tick that box so you can close that window. And now when you go Shift A and go to curve, you'll see add ivy to mesh is the newest one. If you don't have the mesh, or if you don't have a mesh selected, you won't be able to select that. It will just be grayed out, so make sure you got the mesh that you want the ivy to grow along selected, and click excuse me, add ivy to mesh, and now we've got a little bit of ivy growing up along the side of the mesh, which is quite cool. When you generate it, it's just generated with the default settings, nothing spectacular, but as you see in the toolbar here, you can change settings and do everything fun. This is what you want to do as soon as you generate it, because once you start editing other stuff, you lose the ability to change any of these options. So we'll start at the top, and I'll just show you the sort of most important ones that you want to play with. Generally, you do want leaves to come with your ivy, unless you're generating, some tentacly type sort of thing that doesn't have any leaves or anything. Or I mean, you could possibly use it for some weird hairy long tentacle thing, and just have the hairs as planes that have like a texture on them, possibly other weird stuff like that. For now, we're just going to do ivy, seeing as that's what it's intended to generate. So make sure you got grey leaf stick done. And the random seed, if you don't know anything about seeds, it's just sort of the number that it randomly generates everything from. So when you turn that up, it's sort of, and make sure every time you set a setting you have to hit update ivy to make anything change. You see how it changes, but it's still sort of this small little clump of ivy that's not doing much. If I set it to 2, it's just sort of moved over there a bit, and that's more underneath there, and this is a bit more spread out. So it's just sort of a different starting point is the best way to think of it. I'm going to stick with 0. I've got that bit coming up there, and then I'm going to go to max ivy length, and this I will turn up to, let's say, 3, and hit update. It takes a couple of seconds, and then you get all this nice ivy that's generated, and it's all, as you see, climbing up the pillar. And is in a sort of, as a way you'd expect, the ivy leaves sort of tend to stay towards the end of each sort of tentacly bit. So, you know, that's fairly realistic, and all the bits of ivy in here, it's all quite wriggly and what you'd expect to see from ivy. So the guys that worked on this did a really good job, I think. The next main couple of settings is the primary weight and the random weight. The primary weight, sort of, the higher that is, the straighter everything's going to be. So I'll just show you that. I'll turn it up to 1. Hit update ivy. And as you can see, the ivy is quite a lot straighter than it was. It's still got some other random values and stuff. And I done screwed up. As you can see, I deselected everything just then. I did that to just get rid of the gizmo, but now I have lost all my settings over here, so I'm going to have to delete and delete, because the ivy leaves and the actual ivy curvy bits, they come separately, which is nice for texturing. So select the mesh and add ivy to mesh, and I had the length at 3. Take that. I'll just turn this gizmo off so it's not in my way. A bit better. Can't really see very well like that. It's a bit annoying because there's no textures on there yet, so you can't see what's going on. What I could do, tell you what, I will turn the brightness down of the cylinder, just so you can see what's going on, and in the ivy, okay, length 3, update. So now we've got some nice long ivy, and the generally the more, like, because the max ivy length is 3, it doesn't just scale it up, it means it can grow more, so it's denser, there's more leaves than before and everything. So the higher some of these values get, it does get a bit quite crowded in your scene, and it can take up quite a lot of memory, so just bear that in mind. So the primary weight, if I turn that to 1, you can see the change there, where everything's just sort of stuck up and it's all gotten a lot straighter than before. There's still a bit of random weight, so it still gets a little bit of randomness. If I turn that all the way down, everything's, yeah, it's gone, it's all just sticking straight up. It's not very exciting, so it's good to have some randomness in there, as nature is quite a random thing. I'll turn that down a bit. So, yeah, there we go. Nice sort of randomly moving clump. And then the branching probability increases the likelihood that as the ivy is sort of growing along, say along here, I don't think that's actually a branch. Oh well. If, yeah, this piece of ivy, sort of as it grows along, the branching probability, the higher it is, the more likely that, especially lower down, that extra branches of ivy are going to come off and create more leaves and everything and all that. So the more you turn that up, it can get quite intensive. So I turn that up to 0.1 and then go update. It's getting quite thick, especially around here. You can see, and just down here, that's created this bit of ivy it's just shooting up all this stuff, and then there's bits coming off the other side and blah blah blah. So it's looking alright at the moment. And then you want branching size, the ivy branch size is the actual thickness of each of these. little ivy branches. So the higher that number is, the thicker they're going to be. I'll just show you for the point of demonstration. See, everything's got really thick and weird. So if you're trying to come up with some statistical effect, that's a good one to bear in mind. But for the sake of doing ivy, I'll probably just set that down to 0.02. Just take a second for that to update, maybe. Don't know what it's doing. Doesn't appear to be updating. Let's try just nudging that. Oh, there we go. I want it even smaller than that. Was it 002 maybe? Oh, that was the leaf size. Here we go. Okay. Stupid me aside. What was that at? That was in 0.2, I think. Yeah, there we go. Leaves are back. That's good. Okay, so yeah, ivy branch size changes the thickness of the ivy branch. I've just turned it up a tiny little bit. And it just sort of creates a bit more noticeable ivy. And the ivy leaf size, as you can see just then, changes the size of the ivy leaves, and leaf probability. The higher that number is, the more leaves you're going to get, the thicker and denser all the leaves are going to be. So what I like to do, I'll turn that down to 0.1, and I turn leaf size up to 0.1. This is sort of a good setting just to show you, especially when it comes to the render and stuff, so you can see everything that's working. And I mean, if you've got a fairly tight schedule on your production, then the more leaves you got, and if you've got some complex lighting and stuff, it's going to take a lot longer to render as you get along. So that's something to keep in mind. It's always smarter in that sort of situation to have less leaves but make them bigger. So it keeps the density, but the leaves are just sort of bigger and it's slightly less quality, but it's sort of a payoff that you have to work out on your production that you're doing. And for now we're going to jump into GIMP, and I'll just show you how to quickly set up the leaf texture. What I did was I went to plaintextures.com, and that's a bunch of free textures that you can download. And I went to the leaves section, and I'm on page 4, and at the fourth one along the top, in the top right corner, is the image that I selected. It's a sort of the slightly darker ivy leaf that they've got there, and I've just downloaded the smallest resolution one there. You don't need to worry about high resolution, especially with ivy leaves, because they're only going to take up a tiny amount of space in the final render. If it's just sort of in a scene and your characters are walking past, having super high quality leaves isn't going to make the tiniest bit of difference to the final render, because they're not going to be close up to the camera. If your ivy leaves do come up close to the camera, then you are going to want higher resolution textures. But for the sake of this tutorial and for the sake of most productions, you're just only going to want a small leaf size anyway. So I'll just jump into GIMP and open that up. Go to Ivy, the tutorial, and this is the texture. So I'll open that up, and the first thing I want to do is rotate that 180 degrees. So I'll just start the rotate tool, and then this little box comes up. I don't want to rotate it 180, I want to rotate it 90. Yeah, there we go. Rotate. So it's pointing up. I believe that's the way that the sort of Ivy generator thinks about the leaves as pointing up. You could probably point them slightly off to an angle, but the texture itself should be fine like this. And then, actually I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to create a new image. I'm going to create it 128 by 128, so a nice and small texture. So I've got that new image there, and in this old one I'm just going to do Control A to select everything, and then Control C and Control V, and I'll just make this window a bit bigger. As you can see, the leaf is huge compared to the rest of it, but that's okay. I'll just scale this down. Make sure you hold Control to scale it down, constrain the axes and everything, and just click on Scale on the little window that pops up, and I'll just move that back and scale it down. This is this scale window, and I know that the maximum size of either of the dimension is 128. So as I hold Control and scale down, I'll just go to just looking at the width. I'll make that just a little bit smaller than 128, so that I know that it fits within the texture. And what I'm going to want to do is just do a Control C with that and create a new layer. Oh, that's alright actually. Delete that layer, because what you want is to have the background transparent, so that when the leaf gets rendered you don't have all this white space around it, and you just want to be able to see the leaf, and you don't want you want light to pass through all these empty areas is basically what you want to happen. So now I've got that, I'm going to go to Save As, go to my folder. I didn't. Make sure you rotate it, because I didn't do that when I was testing this out and I had all these sideways leaves. So okay, now that looks okay. So Save As, Ivy tutorial, let's give it a name, Ivy leaf. I'll just go to file type and select Targa, and make sure you select Targa because it comes with a alpha sort of channel already built into the image because there's transparency. Just select export on that and then save on this, and you can just X off there, hit discard on anything, and now we've got the texture image actually ready to go. So now I'm going to select the leaves and create a new material on the leaves. I like to turn the intensity up because I've got the texture looking how I want it to, and I don't want it to be slightly less intense. So I don't want it to be dull or anything, so I turn the specular down because I don't want any specular highlights. You generally want it specular to be completely off unless you got a specular map for your ivy leaves. When you got like a transparent texture, what's going to happen is it's going to create a specular highlight on the transparent areas, so you got this little sort of a white glowy bit where there shouldn't be a white glowy bit. And we'll turn on transparency and leave it on Z transparency and turn alpha all the way down to 0 because that's going to be affected by the texture, that the alpha channel on the target that we just created. The final option is just turn on receive transparent, and so any transparent shadows that are being cast onto the leaves look fine. And I'll actually select the cylinder and turn on receive transparent on that one's material as well. So go to the texture, create a new one, and go to image, go to open. I'll just go to find my ivy leaf, and you can see there's the ivy leaf. First setting you want to set is pre-multiply. As you can see in this little preview window here, it's a bit rough on the edges without pre-multiply. Turn that on and it smooths everything off, and it looks nicer that way. And set the coordinates to UV. Make sure you set that, or you're just going to get some weird green squares everywhere. And turn on alpha. I believe that's all the settings you're going to need for your texture. So I'll just go to my camera and go to Y, GX, GZ, and I'm pretty close, so just move that out a bit and hit F12 to render. And as you can see, the ivy leaves are transparent. Actually, yeah, they look fine. Some of them are intersecting, I think. I'm not sure if that's shadows and stuff. Yeah, but if you're getting this close to the ivy, then you're probably getting too close. This is just to show you. I believe there's some settings in there to do with the distance of the ivy from an object, so you want to look at those and stuff to sort out any intersections. I think that's most of what you need, really. I'll just put a material on. Oh, that's a texture. Material on the actual ivy curve. I'll make it this sort of browny colour. Maybe about there. Turn the darkness down. You don't want it to be too obvious that it's there. So specular off, intensity up. Yeah, so now there's these brown bits that the ivy's coming off. If you look at ivy, if you look at pictures of ivy and stuff, or go outside and look at it, you'll find that the actual colour of the curvy bits it sort of varies. It goes from sort of a green to a brown to a light brown, with sort of yellowy colours. So any sort of natural colour will do just for that. You're probably not going to want to put a texture on that because it's so thin that you're not going to see any sort of texturing on there. I think that just about covers everything as far as ivy goes. It's a pretty cool new plugin for Blender 2.5 and soon to be 2.6. So looking forward to the final version when that comes around. I'll just set up for this. There you go. So if you've got any comments or anything, make sure you leave them on the bottom of this video. Let me know if you've got any ideas for any other tutorials or anything you'd like to see. I'm probably going to cover the trees plugin or add-on that came with this version as well. I'll cover that next week. The texturing and stuff's fairly similar on that. But there are some cool stuff that you can do with trees to make some nice realistic looking trees. So until then, good luck with your ivy, and I'll see you next week.